Okay, so let's pick up where we left off. We had designed this. We did forget one pretty important thing though. Right now, all this soil is going directly up against the retaining wall. We've got this helping us with water, but all this is unprotected. So generally speaking, as you're building it, there is some additional form of waterproofing material on the outside. Sometimes it's super thin, sometimes it's thicker. Wherever you end up working, they'll have their preferred practices. So for today, we're just going to draw a generic one. Um, I mean, the most basic ones you roll on with a paint roller and they theoretically seal the pores. They're not particularly effective. Then there's some plastic membranes that are thin, and then there's some thicker ones that are textured. So we're just going to create something a little bit thicker, but not crazy. So let me first see if I can hide my zoom controls, which you probably can't even see. All right. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to go to architecture, component, model in place. And I'm still going to make this a plumbing equipment, even though it's not really. I'm going to make an extrusion, and I'm going to pick grid C. So I don't necessarily want it ending here because soils shift sometimes. So I'm going to come up above the soil. I'm going to make a rectangle. And I'm just going to come down here. I want it to be roughly an inch. I can't see my dimension from here. That's all right. I'm just going to finish. I can click on this vertical and that'll allow me to change this dimension to be 1 inch. I'll click OK. I'm going to change my material now from concrete to maybe plastic. I'm going to use this black roofing plastic because it's easy to see. Now, before I finish the model, though, I want to come to my 3D view. I want to use the shape handles to drag it all the way back. All right. So before we go changing this to be a better material and making it not overlap, I want to show you the material part of it. So if you come to your Manage tab, you go to Materials, you can create a new one. I'm going to rename it Backfill. And now if you've never used this before, right next to the Create New is an asset browser. And it has a lot of different images that you can use for materials that are just buried. They couldn't put them all in. It would just be too massive. Um, so if you click on that, now you've got all this stuff. You got drop downs over here. But I'm just going to start typing aggregate. And now you can see I've got some here. Any of these ones with the yellow are not going to be great. So if I don't see anything I like, I can come in, I can check site work. Do I like anything here? I can check masonry. No, that's nothing there I want. Let's check concrete. Let me see what stone. All right, I'm going to go with the exposed aggregate, even though it's got this symbol. I'm going to give it a shot. So you just double click. And now I have my new image I didn't need to go to Google and search for a seamless texture. It's already in Revit. If if you don't find anything you like, then yeah, go ahead and go to Google. But there's all sorts of stuff in here, like for the people who did Kimball Museum, and we had those water features, you could have come in here and picked that. Or you can just, once you see water, you can say liquid. What kind of liquids do I have? Got all sorts of liquids. Murky river, a reflecting pool. So there's all sorts of built-in stuff that they just bury in the asset library. All right, so I'm going to close this out. I'm going to click apply. Okay. Now I want to edit this. I want to edit the material and I want to make it so that the boundary is not overlapping with our water membrane. So I'm going to come in to the south view. I'm going to click on it, edit in place, click on it again. I'll start with this. I'll just do the backfill. Oops. Click OK. And now I'm going to edit the actual extrusion. So you can see we're coming all the way over to the wall, and that's not what we want. I'm just going to use the align tool. I'm going to click the outside of this membrane if it'll let me. There we go. And now I'm going to click this. So now our shape is completely inside and doesn't come all the way to the wall. Click OK. Finish model. And this isn't perfect, but it gives me a clear indication that we've dug up the earth here in order to do this. This is all undisturbed soil, and this is site work we've done. Now, if you noticed in this drawing I showed earlier, 90% of the time, your drain pipe is not going to be above the footing, it's going to be off to the side. But every now and then you'll see it the way we've modeled it. So I'm not going to spend more time moving this over and redrawing everything. If that is the case, your membrane would stretch down and it would cover the footing as well. All right, let's move on. We've got to do some walls now. And the facade of this building is a little bit unique. You can see we've got exposed structure, so we need to make sure our walls just run in between our columns, but also below our beams. And the shadow tells us that it sticks proud of the surface by a little bit. Now each one has slightly different placement of windows, size of windows. You're going to need to do 4 different ones. You don't need to make it exactly like this. You're just going to have to use this concept to model it. It can be a little bit of a pain. There's no perfect way because in order to do this, we're going to have to make it into parts and then we're going to have to create a division for these panels. And as soon as you turn things into parts in Revit, you then have walls and parts, and the parts won't copy unless you also have the wall. They're visible in different views, and once you're used to it, it's fine. But until then, it can be tricky to remember that you need to go back and forth between different views because one of them is only going to show the parts and one of them is going to show the actual wall. So if you try and copy the parts, you'll get an error message that says you cannot copy the parts without their host. I'll show you, but just giving you a heads up. So we're going to start with architecture wall. We want this brick on CMU. If you don't default there, just go ahead and grab until you use your drop down until you see it. Click on it. This is not the exact thing we're going to use, but it's close. So we're going to duplicate it and make a few edits. So once you've got this selected, you're going to go to edit type and you're going to say duplicate. And I'm just going to call this Yale Art Museum. All right, now I'm going to go into the structure. If you've not used this before, you can see we have the interior side and the exterior. So in this particular one, we got brick on the outside and drywall on the inside. We're going to switch ours to steel and wood, and we're going to make a couple other changes so that it fits the geometry we're trying to create. We also have these functions. It's best practice to make them accurate. We won't have to change up here, but down here we're going to change this metal furring to thermal insulation. So we're going to want to change that. I'm going to start up here and I'm going to change the brick to steel. And it's not going to be the shiny stuff, just use regular steel. And it's obviously that be really thick and heavy and expensive. So we're just going to make that 1/2 inch. Now our air pocket, we'll drop that down to 2. We'll bump our insulation up to 4. I know it's still 6 inches, but this is going to be more energy efficient. The membrane, it's damp proofing, but it has no thickness. We're going to leave it exactly as is. Concrete masonry units come in default sizes, so we don't need to adjust that. These are the last 2 things we need to change. Again, we want to make sure, since this is going to be rigid insulation, that we change this to a thermal or an air layer. And we're just going to type in insulation, go with rigid. We'll make it another 4 inches. And now for this, I'm just going to use the softwood. I'm not a fan of this stain if we end up using anything that shows the realistic, so I'm just going to ditch it. You can leave it 5/8 if you want. I'm going to bump mine up to 1 inch. Not that any sheet goods are actually a full inch. And we don't need to change anything else. So we've got our outside finish. We've got a bunch of other materials. We've got our core boundary. This is the structural part. And then we've got our inside finish. Click OK. And now, again, we want to have exposed columns and beams. So I'm going to just start from the center point here. Move it over. None of the creative elements are visible. Okay. Well, we got to fix that. So if I come into visibility graphics, and I scroll down to walls, oh, they're already checked. So 90% of the time, this is your fix. But in this case, you can see we're set to structural discipline, and we've just put in an architectural wall. So we need to switch to architectural, and now it shows up. Now our detail right now is pretty poor, and I want to line up our concrete masonry units with the back of this. So I need to switch this to fine detail. And we're going to leave the outside proud and exposed. And in the real building, the inside is as well. But we're going to change his design a little bit, and we're going to break the thermal bridge by moving our insulation over. So bring this down. So now later when we break this thing into parts, I can drag this to cover, and we'll break that insulation and make the building a little more efficient. All right, so I'm in between column to column. Let's take a look from the outside. And again here, same issue as before. We can't see the wall. Why is that? Well, we're in structural again. So every single view that you're going to be working with the walls in, you need to make sure you change to architecture. So now we're cutting into this. I need to drag it down. Hopefully it'll snap. I'm just going to leave it short for now. And you can, if your snap is not working, you can always use the align tool. All right, so now I have a single wall that fits in between my columns and my beams. So now I can start copying it. I'm going to go back to this level. I'll highlight it. And copy it once using my grids. And now you can either draw them again over here, or there is a way to use mirror draw axis. So I'm going to highlight both of these. I'm going to use mirror draw axis. And I'm going to come from this corner at 45 degrees. And now you can see what happened. Anytime you have a regular wall and they both touch a shared structural column, Revit automatically closes this up for you. That's fine. We can fix it. We're going to drag this short. Come on. Nope. Now I'm going to drag this short. So later, when we break them into parts, we can drag this right up to the edge of the column and it will not do that automatic wrap thing. Now here's where you've got to make a decision for yourself. We've got 4 walls. I actually put them on the wrong floor. They should have been on the 3rd floor. So let me go to my south elevation. Again, I can't see them because I've got this in structural. I'm going to go to architectural, apply. Oh, no, okay, there. Yeah, the bottom floor is we're going to do with curtain walls. So I didn't make a mistake. Woohoo. All right, so we could, if we want right now, come in, grab all these, uncheck everything but wall, and start copying them. We have to unconstrain, unconstrain. And so now we would have 12 walls that fit within all of our structure. Problem is now you got to go 12 times, turn them into parts, drag the handlebars where you want them. Then after they're turned into parts and we want to subdivide those parts into divisions, you got to do that 12 times. I'm going to show you a different way. It's also not ideal because, well, I'll just show you. But once you create parts, if you try and copy them up, it won't move without the host. And once I make this into a part, it's gonna, so I'll show you here. I'm gonna say create parts, right? So now it's a part. If I come in from this view and I right click, oh, come on. I go to my filter. Now I got lucky and the wall was still visible this time. So now if I uncheck everything and I go parts and walls, now I could copy that up. Sometimes what'll happen though is it won't still see the wall from this view. And then you got to go back and forth, and this view will only see the wall and not the parts. See here, I can't, if I do this, I go into filter, and you see parts doesn't show up. So if you're in a view where you're only seeing parts and you're not seeing wall, you can always come back in here, make sure you're highlighting both the parts and the wall, and then you can copy them all up, and you don't have to go through the tedious process of redoing each one. So let me go ahead and break these into parts for now. Actually, that one should already be in part, right? But I did it on a level, it's not cooperating. Right, so I'm going to do it from here now, because this is where I want to actually drag and see my geometry. So I'm going to click create parts. And now I can go in individual parts and drag them. Right now, the shape handles, I don't know why they don't automatically show up. You've got to come over here, click show shape handles, and now I can drag it, snap there. Same with this, show shape handles. You only have to do it once, luckily, for each part. All right, so I'm going to do that. Same here. Like I said, this is tedious, um, but it's how to make it look like the real building. All right, and now I don't necessarily have to do both of these over here. Like you could if you wanted to, you could drag them each to the midline. Kind of lazy, so I'm just going to drag one all the way across. And that still does the same job of breaking this thermal bridge. All right, so I've got this. Now I'm going to break this one into parts. Turn on my shape handles. Close that off. Again, because you got to do show shape handles each time, I'm going to need to make this into parts anyway in order to do the subdivisions. But if that's all I need to do and I don't need to go in and manually change each shape handle, I'm going to do it the most efficient way possible, even though none of this particular process is what I would call efficient. All right, so we got our walls. We'll go to the 3D view and make sure we didn't accidentally cover that corner. Nope, we're still exposed. We're in good shape. But you can see here I got the wall that I've dragged back, and here I've got the parts. So visually from here, if you were trying to, once you copied everything, if you didn't want this anomaly, you would just highlight it and hide the wall in view. I don't want to do that yet because we're not done. All right, got all these. I'm going to go ahead and turn the others into parts. Parts, and I don't need to do anything with these other than turn them into parts. The reason we're doing that is for the next step. So the next step is subdividing like this. And that only works if you've turned your wall into parts. If you tried to do that with a regular wall, it's not going to happen. All right, so we've got it. We need to make it into parts now. This view is not really helpful to me. So what I need now, I need my north and my west. All right. And again, okay, this one is architectural. I'm going to go ahead and make it realistic. So that's the wall. Can I not fix that one? Okay, and now north. But we're still in structure. So if I want to make a wall, oh, I don't want the wall. I'll show you over here. Now it's still showing wall instead of parts. All right, cancel that. All right, so here I can only pick my wall. I'm in architectural. I am going to go to visibility graphics because I want to be able to get my wall parts so that I can subdivide it. So I'm going to click apply. Okay. So now when I click on it, and this thing's in my way again. Sorry, let me just hide the zoom controls that you can't even see, but they're blocking what I need. All right. So if I go to divide parts, I'm going to need to do it from 3D. Let's try it again. Divide parts. Yes. All right. So this bit we need to do from 3D. We cannot do it from the elevation. So you see, you got intersecting references. So we need to create something to tell it where we want it to divide. Our options, we can do levels, not great, grids, reference planes. The easiest thing to do is to create some reference planes, and then we'll be able to take care of it. So can't really do it until I've created reference planes. So what I want, and I'll come to, let's see, is this my north? All right, so I'm going to come to my north. And I'm going to make two verticals that are midway here. So go to architecture, reference plane. And this is 1, 2, and 2, 3. So I'm just going to come from the midpoint down. And I'm going to call it 1, 2, mid. Now, rather than redrawing it, I can click on it. I could say copy. Now it's automatically going to be at the midpoint. Who knows what it's going to have named it? It's calling it 6. Cool. So now this is 2, 3. So now I've got reference vertically for this one and this one. Now I need two more to split this into 6 parts. Unfortunately, if you try and use the align tool to space them evenly, doesn't actually work with reference planes. So we're going to draw reference planes, but we're also going to draw some model lines so that we can align them. I'm going to start with, all right, so we're going between, well, this is the second floor one. So I'm just going to call it reference plane. I'm just going to draw it randomly at this point. And I'm going to call it bottom 2. First I have to highlight it, then copy. And location doesn't really matter right now because we're going to have to fix it anyway. And now it's just changed it to bottom 3, but this is actually top 2. All right, so this is north. Let me see which grid we're going to draw our model lines on. If I come to the second floor, so we're going to draw them on A. So I'm going to come to architecture, model line, pick grid A. And, oh, I'm not a rectangle. I want a single line coming through. Turn off chain. And now I can just copy that one. Doesn't matter where. I'm going to use the align tool. After I take the top of this, first line, second line, now the bottom. Now I can make these equal. So that would create 6 even parts. I'm going to switch the wireframe for a minute. I don't really want to see these. They're just distracting me right now. But I can use the align tool and click on the model line and this reference, model line and this reference. All right, cool. We're back in business. I'm going to go back to my 3D view. I'm on my north side of the building. I got parts. I'm going to divide the parts. And I'm going to use intersecting references. I'm going to switch to my reference planes. And I want to have, this one is between 1 and 2, we said. And the top and bottom. All right. Now we're going to click OK. And so now, instead of one big panel of steel like this, we have 6 smaller panels of steel. And this will give us the flexibility later when we're trying to decide where to put our windows. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Divide parts. I'm going to use my references. I'm going to switch to planes. And now this one is 2, 3, bottom and top. All right, cool. 2 of them done. We can either redraw over here, or we can highlight all our reference planes. And go to the second floor. I can say I want to mirror draw axis. And I can just make sure I'm at 45 degrees. And so now if I come to that west elevation, I should see some more lines. I'm going to want to make sure I know the names. That is not a good name. Um, I'm not 100% sure where the west elevation point is, so it's hard for me to adjust. Let me just drag this out and hope. Ah, there we go. I get this closer so I don't need a giant box. All right, so now from the west, I can see that this is AB and BC. So I can label this AB mid. And this one is BC mid. Now this one, yep, so this is the ones that copied is top 5 and top 6. I'm not going to bother renaming those. I could call it bottom 2.1, top 2.1, but as long as I know they're 5 and 6, I can come into the 3D mode. Over to these walls, make sure it's the part that's being selected, not the wall. Divide the parts, intersecting references. Now I want top 5, top 6. And was it A and B or B and C? Let me double check. So yeah, that's AB. Done. One more, grab the part. Divide parts. Switching to reference planes. Now it's BC, top 5, top 6. Click OK. So now in theory, if I come through from this view, I'm going to go right to left, making sure I've got top, mid, and bottom panels. I can filter. I want to get rid of grids, lines, and columns so that all I have is my parts and my walls. Click apply, click OK. Now I can copy, undo the constraint. Undo the constraint again. And unfortunately, well, that's too bad. So we kept our verticals, but we didn't get the horizontals because we didn't create reference planes up here. So that's a little annoying, but not too bad to fix. I can come to my north elevation. I can highlight both of these. I can use the copy tool. And I have to go through the process of renaming these, re-breaking these. We've already got the verticals, so you would only be adding. Well, let's do one just to show everybody and make sure. Well, that's top 10 and top 9. And this is 1, 2 mid. And let's go 3D. I grab that part, divide parts, intersecting references, the reference planes. I'm going to go with top 9 and top 10. Click OK. And now I got those parts. So you would have to redo those, but it's better, in my opinion, than doing everything twice. So I'm not going to finish these all off. You've seen how to do it, but I am going to show you the window part. So I'm going to come a little this way. I'm going to just drop a fixed window in here. It doesn't really matter where. All right, so now I've got this window. The good part about this, I'm going to go to my north elevation where I can see it. A lot of times you got to come in, you got to edit the type, you got to change the dimensions. As long as you're in an elevation, I can use the align tool. So let's say I want it to take up the top two here. I can highlight the window, go to align, click the top of the window, click the side, midpoint. So anytime you use the align tool, first you're clicking where you want things to move, then you're clicking the thing you want to move. So now I got a window taking 2/3. Again, like I said, there's 4 different ones. You can do more than 4 if you want. So if you just wanted a single window over here, you got to go into 3D view to drop it down. That one's not divided yet, so I'll show it up here where I've taken time to divide it. All right, so I'm gonna go to architecture, window, drop it in here. Now I'm gonna go back to my north elevation. I'm gonna highlight the window. I'm gonna use the align tool. I'm gonna say here on the top. Now I'm gonna come over here to the side. That's weird. It didn't get it perfect, but that's fine. Again, we're practicing more than perfecting here. Huh. All right. Oh, I'm probably looking through there. All right. So now I've got something like this. Yeah, that's fine. So that's the process. Um, Unfortunately, it's the quickest way that I know of. If anybody knows of a faster way, I'd love to hear it. Once you're done, to avoid this nonsense, you can just go through, you can click one wall and say, hide the category. Now all you're left with is the parts. So that's the process. That's your foundation. Once you finish this and you got 4 different ones at least, that's the assignment for this week. Next week, we'll put some curtain walls down here, the roof's up top, and we'll talk about a bunch of construction details and callouts. All right, have a great weekend. I'll see you guys next week.